the little plants in the water, whose name I probably used to know. They are circling in a great migration in this little part of the pool. They are dancing. They are traveling. And there's something like a turbulent spiral. Hey everybody. Even though it's very, very slow. And this pond is often harassed by machine noises. No, this pond is it's fed from an underground aquifer, but it's a mechanically, sustained pond, right? You can see the pipe. And of course, everything here in the gardens is artificial in the sense that humans decided, here we will make a park. It was all sand dunes. And so they made a park here. But one can't see it, I can't anyway, see it in the same way as I might see, like a fork or a book or a machine. It's not artificial in that sense because there's a living collaboration going on. Excuse me. Even if the humans are not particularly sensitive collaborators. This is a mashup of human ideas and anciently evolved life forms that ordinarily don't find themselves in such diverse proximity to one another. Now, around this little pond is bamboo. And in the wind, the bamboo makes a very unique, it has a library of musics it makes. It's quite profound. But I was walking past the pond and I dropped something. A couple coins fell out of my purse as I was looking around, and so I thought I'd wander over. I thought I would interpret the coins dropping from my purse as a signal to pay attention right here, right? In other words, like there's value here, right? The metification of the playful metification, right? Not like a religion, more like an adventure. And so the coins fell out of my purse, and as I reached down to pick them up, I thought, maybe I won't just walk on. Maybe I'll start paying attention right here. And then I saw the migrating water plant situation. Not to mention the wonderful reflection in the water. The reflections in the water, they are enchanting. I mean, one might call them enchantments in the water. But whether or not they seem inviting and open, whether or not they inspire us with wonder or awe or even fear of their astonishing depth and potentials, and I mean that in sense of, in our relation with them, emotionally, imaginally, cognitively, and with our hearts, right, with our essence. The reflections are truly profound, but only for those who can find the path beyond. The tragically vacuous nature of our adulthood that sees things in terms of functions and, oh, I already know about that. I was thinking the other day, and this is not an uncommon thought for me, but I think a glimpse of the actual nature of any tree, any old tree, or, an ant, or anything that, any of the living beings, right? A glimpse, if the tree could actually reveal to us, which they can, providing we're properly receptive, something of the nature of its way of being, its essence, what it carries within in terms of knowledge and histories and unexpected opportunities for animals and human beings. If we could see for just a moment the tiniest glimpse of what a living being actually is, and without, like I said, we don't need to see all of it, and it doesn't have to be perfectly correct. It just needs to have the proper dimensionality, right? The depth, the living depth that's actually there. It would obliterate religion. All of our religions would look a bit clumsy, to be kind. And, science would pass out in shock, I think. Or scientists would, since science isn't really a being and can't pass out. No, all of our stories would be rocked to their core. In fact, we'd have to revise our knowledge of everything from the ground up. If we could get a tiny glimpse, an authentic glimpse, into the being of any of the living beings that we so easily dismiss with words. I remember saying I used to know the name of the little plant, and I'm pretty sure I did. But be assured that never helped me much, right? Because that name doesn't contain any knowledge. I was listening to something I've long been aware of. Well, I think the same thing would happen if a stone could, communicate to us. And perhaps all of this doesn't seem to make a lot of sense on the surface, or like it might seem like I have some strange religion, or, something like this. Oh. Here is what I am quite sure is a coyote burrow. And it's probably a little bit dangerous to approach it, but I don't know because I have so little experience with animal burrows. But let's have a look nonetheless. Discovered this a couple of weeks ago, and it's only been about 2.5 weeks since I saw my first animal burrow, and I was very cautious because I don't know what to expect. I don't know if it's reasonably safe to approach or not. If the animal might suddenly come out and I don't actually know what animal is in there. And I was just confused because I've been in the gardens for many years and I've never seen a burrow like this. Though I'm sure the workers here probably have. And this is a trail where I commonly come across coyote scat. And I expect that it's a coyote burrow. But in the back of my mind, I secretly wonder if it might be something even more feral. And I think of badgers as more feral. I'm curious, is it possible there could be badgers here? I've heard one person very emphatically declare that they saw a badger in here, but I've never seen any evidence of such a situation, and I think there'd be some. So it might sound like I have some kind of strange religion. And I don't mind really if people misinterpret me, but I'd rather communicate clearly enough that some of my intended meaning, arises in the imagination of those who listen. People like you. And thank you for listening. Oh, I'm all surgically prepared here for my adventure in the garden today. And it's off to a good start with the little vortex in the pond. So as I was saying, everything here is man-made in the sense of humans planned and built and established and brought in all these plants and tend them and edit them and regularize them. And on the one hand, it's absolutely gorgeous and wonderful, but there are many tragic aspects to it. The plants are deprived of their natural symbionts if they're not from around here. And some of them are so peculiarly developed that they live in very close symbiosis with 1 or 2 or 12 other large organisms, and possibly hundreds of, maybe thousands of microorganisms, kinds of microorganisms. So, humans in their zoos. I understand the idea, the implementation leaves much to be desired. Well, with zoos, it's a nightmare. But I don't really have a religion about it. What I have are very surprising experiences in which, usually unexpectedly, nature reaches out. This is the place where a tragedy took place. This was one of the darker moments of adventure. Came here one day making a video, set my phone down here, just this blue barrel. I saw a beautiful raptor feather back here, and then as I looked into the barrel, which had about this much water in it, there was a drowned raptor inside the barrel. And I've taken that video down for reasons I can't entirely explain. But I've had experiences where suddenly and unexpectedly doorways into the intelligences of nature and the relations of living places and beings have suddenly opened up and invited me in to remember, to recognize, to see from non-human perspectives, and some of them far exceed our wildest dreams. They're so profound and exotic, it is not possible to imagine them. But to be drawn directly into the experience. And, this happens actually, there isn't anything else that's happening. It's just that the scale and scope and discontinuity is most often for us very low, right? very small. We may appreciate the beauty of this datura. I wonder why it has so few leaves. I wonder if it's seasonal. These plants fill the air with astonishing fragrances in the night. So I've had experiences where suddenly, unexpectedly, I've traveled through it's very difficult to think of how to talk about this meaning clearly. Something in the foundation of my mind, and perhaps my body, and maybe something else that I don't have the right word for, but it could be my soul, shifts. And often this shift is unexpected, even though I could be seeking it. Right? I could be going along thinking, I'd like to have an adventure in nature's doorways today. Sort of like I am now. Right? In my waking mind, my ordinary, I think this would be really fun. And I would like to learn some more and see again and remember again. And that intention is very helpful in some way. But luck and opportunity and so many other things are involved. So many other qualities are involved. But it's not that I have a strange religion. It's that I have experiences in and with living creatures in nature that there is no corollary of in my ordinary human life, knowledge, expectation, thought, perception. They are outside completely. They even make experiences of significant intoxication or psychedelia appear relatively timid in comparison, and also kind of fake in a specific way that's difficult to encapsulate in language. There's a kind of, it's as if there is, in fact, it's so hard not to use value-laden words. There is something holy in the sense of more than merely unified, right? It's a one that keeps finding new ways to be more than merely a unity. In other words, you can imagine this, right? You can imagine very simply a set of points. We'll think of them as beings, and we'll connect 5 of them, right? And then we'll give them each new colors of connection. Right now we get a new dimension of unity, and then we connect some in more intimate loops of union, and others in, what could we say? We'll just put a little mark next to the other groups, right? So you can see that something that's fundamentally unified can continue to develop new dimensions of unity, right? Which I often think of as new degrees of freedom, because in essence they're new dimensions in which we can sense, interact, and we mimic this process with our machines, which is really weird. Except that it's very clear to me why we get why we do the mimicry instead of the. Well, what I mean is, once the mimicry begins and people become fascinated with it, what it's mimicking disappears from our sense, our access. because we become trained by the resulting commodities and representations and transactions and so on and so forth. And these are really very tedious and sort of dimensionally dead. They're dead inside. There's no there. There's no real content. And much of it is mediated by machines and money. There isn't anything the humans have learned that wasn't derived from nature. So if you want to go to the original place, it's all waiting. And some of the living world is deeply excited, not everywhere, not all the time, but some of the world is deeply excited and is seeking an opportunity, so to speak, to bridge the old gulf between the humans and the sky, between the humans and the origins of life and being, between the humans and the living places, between the humans and the animals, between the humans and the plants. Because the humans are very powerful. Not to mention unexpectedly confusable, and so very dangerous. And so the living places and the living beings well, I wonder if I'm anthropomorphizing here. Well, I think there's a natural reticence that could be felt by the living places and the living beings. Because our class of animal is unpredictable, disoriented, ravenous, cruel, ignorant, blind, and very, very powerful. So that looks just about like a demon, really. It looks like just something that's totally disoriented and ripping things apart with an endless hunger to produce things that actually don't matter much. So there's a natural trepidation in relation to our class of animal. And see, here's the real problem. When in thought or cognition, properties that we've associated with individual experiences or specific experiences of some group we distinguish, when we decide to transfer those properties to the entire class of people, so that we then say, for example, men of X kind, right, are all Y, because some men of X kind have been known to be Y. So this is the fallacy of exchanging the qualities of instances, of extending them over the whole class. And the humans do this all the time. You can see this going on all over the news, in social media. Our modern situation might even be said to have weaponized this possibility. So because the humans are sort of generally mean and untrustworthy, and most of the encounters that living creatures and living places have with humans do not go well for them if there's any kind of extended contact. And part of the reason is that the humans are just not really in the relationship at all. In a way, they're kind of like a disembodied animal. They're really, from nature's perspective, we'd be really terrifying. I think we'd be at least as terrifying as the idea of aliens who are totally estranged from our humanity would be to us, right? So the situation is a little bit peculiar. However, thankfully, nature isn't very thinky. Yeah? It has this other way of being intelligent that's nothing like words, and much deeper and much richer and more trustworthy. And it has humor, but it doesn't dissemble. I recall no experience. I can get things wrong, but I recall no experience of the living world speaking with me in which I wasn't aware of encountering a species of truth so deep, so absolutely trustworthy, as if my bones and the mind I beheld it with were made of it, right? It wasn't mere recognition of truth, it was a kind of self-recognition of, oh yeah, this is what the essence of minds and intelligence and consciousness and being, oh yes, now I remember, it's like this experience that I, often, well, occasionally is a better word, have with living beings or places: the lake, the ocean, the night sky, the garden, a tree, some animal, some insects, the mountain. And again, the language is very tricky and value-laden. People will suppose I'm talking about, spirituality, that this is the topic that I'm on. It's not. That's one of the few branches, that's one of the few ways of knowing, yes, filled with counterfeit nonsense, but not itself essentially nonsensical. That's one of the only ways of knowing that we have any input from that resembles what I'm, reflecting upon. But there was a time before which things were thus distinguished, right? There was a time before which there was any idea of spirituality, and whatever we might use that word to refer to was either not going on because it was sort of a modern thing, or it was so embodied and embedded that it was indistinguishable from just being, right? The same way one's emotions are kind of indistinguishable from just being. One's relationally extended sensorium was just indistinguishable from being. I suspect our ancestors regularly felt they were engaged in living conversations with animals and plants and living places, and song was involved in these conversations. Song was regularly involved, and also song resulted from these conversations. It was a product, because the ecstasy of such a conversation, the relief at finally being welcomed back into a circle of deeply authentic purpose, shared mutual purpose, deeply authentic intelligence, knowledge of a kind that supersedes both thought and dreaming. That refreshing reassurance And you know, it's a shared thing. It goes both ways. It's as if somehow I'm the long-lost family member of this pond. And this pond is like the physical, yeah. The pond is a living secret that recognizes me and is recognized when our essences come together in conversation. And so we both transform in a way that's ancient and familiar and unique to every experience, yet not dissimilar along the continuum of experiences. I wonder if the frogs are still here. I don't hear their plops. I was thinking of many things today. I was thinking of some of the sort of Taoist ideas embodied in martial arts, particularly perhaps Tai Chi, Qigong, Xingyi, Bagua, pushing hands, Tui Shao. I was thinking about this place before the yin and the yang have divided, yeah? Before they divide and become active. Stillness. I think there are endless varieties of stillness, and often I accidentally stumble into a kind of inner stillness just before a doorway in nature opens up. The stillness and the invitation. They seem related. It's my experience that we're embedded in a universe staggeringly more exotic than the entire collection of human conjectures. And we're made of it. It's not right next door. We're made of it. We're made of this astonishing, accessible wonderment. And our original home remembers us, our home before bodies, before identities, It remembers us. And the world is all made of this, but there's a kind of reflective shell on the top, and it's composed of habits and thinking and names and concepts and science, and right, it's that shell is very peculiar. But the mind is layered. I was thinking about this too. And the layers are almost like, they can be thought of usefully as similar to like the geologic strata, right? That paleontologists and geologists and similar folks or archaeologists study, right? The strata of time. And so our minds are like this. And the superficial shell-like structure is super new and has no room to move around in there in the senses that there would be if you could go down just one layer to a little bit an older strata, right? But there's stuff in our minds, in the sort of nature of this layered manifold. There's stuff in there for purposes we've written stories about, but very rarely embodied in the modern world. There's a reason why we have myths and religions, and it's not because some people a long time ago liked to make up really fantastical things and scare each other with them. No, that's not why we have them. There's all of the aspects of heroism, altruism, tragedy, hubris, drama, nemesis, all of these things. They are the rather, well, in their time they were different. That's the problem. The minds who read them now can't see the richness they encode, unfortunately, for most of us. Though we can learn to. And I think that's a wonderful thing to do. To try to understand the minds of the ancients. And also the developmental course, the sort of course and the milestones and the adventures we can discover in the evolution of human consciousness. So I was thinking about the layered mind and how if we could get but the tiniest glimpse of the essence of any living being, its real nature, or its more truthful nature, if we could just slightly more closely approach what's actually going on with consciousness in a way where we become participants again in a conversation, then the sky's not the limit. There is no limit. In fact, yeah. Because there's so much depth there that our modern minds cannot admit. And if they can admit some of it, they're very inclined by knowledge and context, and especially if we are single language users and so on, they're very inclined to flatten the whole idea of identity. A tree is just blah blah blah, some tree, a laurel or an oak, a name, and that's pretty much the end of their interest in the situation, unless it can be converted into lumber or is particularly beautiful and they'd like to preserve it or something like that. They have some utilitarian idea. Of course, there are many people who have discovered that there are doorways in nature to varying depths, but most of them have stayed within the human knowledge framework, the modern human knowledge frameworks. And those are incapable of admitting the incredible, I don't know what other word to use, there's like this profusion of dimensional existence, like, and intelligence and awareness. But I mean that's just the beginning. If we could glimpse the essence of a sparrow, or any one thing at all. I mean, this is the weird thing. The humans don't know the first thing about anything. We have theories about mechanical relationships between distinguishable elements. I mean, suppose you had that about me. Well, what would that do for you? What would you know of me? Not much. And it's certainly, this is both necessary and insufficient in terms of a relationship with nature. It seems necessary. We want to know the mechanics. But why do we want to know the mechanics? And what will we do with them? These are incredibly important questions. Our worldview has this shell that reflects incoming novelty away from us, reflects incoming signals and communication. It just doesn't penetrate. It doesn't penetrate our worldview, our world concept, right? In which trees are just plants. Funguses are just funguses. Viruses are just viruses. The relationship is totally abstract, right? That's not a relationship. That's the problem. It's not that it's unuseful to have abstract knowledge. It's that it presents dangers of defection from embodied knowing and deep communion. If there's no reason for reverence other than the complexity of the structures derived from analysis, I think we're lost. If this in no way invalidates the beauty of that we can feel or sense in mathematics or physics or biology, which are, very clinical, toward objective knowledge, knowing paths. And I don't want to throw them away, but or yet they have our familiarity with them has transferred the places where they're incredibly shallow to the super container, to the everything, right? So that our worldview has been denuded by the way we authorize or over-authorize not science or scientific thought, but what we make of it in terms of its entailments, right? So if we universalize the entailments of a relatively young system of knowledge, we've made some very dangerous and deceptive mistake, because once we do that, we've changed the thing we see with. See the problem there? You're really going to have a hard time fixing that. If you change the thing you see with in a way that deprives you of liberties, kinds of liberty, you're going to have a really hard time even noticing that happened, because you can't see changes to the thing you see with the thing you see with. Maybe that should be a tongue twister. And this is part of what's gone on with our species as we became modern. We kept changing the thing we compose our worldview with and of in such a way that it became analytically sophisticated and relationally crippled. And if you can only have one of these, you probably want relationships. Because the analysis isn't going to do you much good without oxygen or, trees, whales, mice, hummingbirds, children, sage, thyme, oregano, lavender, rosemary. Names in English are kind of broken. It would be better if names told us something profound about what they refer to. I was thinking about that too. That often crosses my mind. I don't reject outright the Latinate, the Latin biological taxonomies. Those are useful where they're useful, but our names should say something about our relationships with the beings and the nature of the beings that we tag them with. I would like that. I would like to speak a language that was like that. I would like to know a language that is like that. And in nature, when I have an experience, oh, that's not good. Warplanes. One of them was carrying an extended fuel tank. I heard warplanes this morning and I was concerned. However, I think it's likely that it's about to be Fleet Week here or something like this. I'm not certain. Find out later. You'd think if something made that much noise, humans would realize this is just a really bad idea. I mean, yeah, sure, it flies, but it makes thundering catastrophe of sound. Like, not in any good way. And I guess as a war machine, that's probably a good quality. But it just seems like an incredibly bad idea to me. Which is very ironic because as a child I thought jet aircraft were the greatest thing ever, and I wanted to be, like a fighter pilot or an astronaut or both and more. Who knows what? A spaceman. I guess I kind of became a spaceman, but in a very ironic way. Nothing like going to outer space. More like bringing outer space home. Drawing it down from the sky into us. Which I think is, maybe one of the peculiar specializations of our species that's been forgotten. Though you see its spirit in science fiction and things like this. We've lost wonder. The scientistic, not scientific, but the scientistic projections on identity and meaning and truth have been very strange. Inclined us to blindness of many different kinds. And this isn't because the science isn't good, it's because we transfer what we learned from the science to other things, right? Worldviews and ideas and bases for evaluation. The other thing I was thinking about earlier, since I think I'm going to wrap up here pretty quick. I was just thinking about the profoundly amazing idea, and though I'm not, I'm certainly not entitled to speak about anything. How can I say this? This is very strange, and the only reason I'm even saying this is because modernity has gone loopy, it seems. But I'm not really entitled to speak with knowledge about the ways of life of Blackfoot people. But I have learned some things from Blackfoot people. And their teepees are really quite a profound thing, because there are little instances of the universe, right? So they're opening points, I think, usually in a specific direction, and if I get any of this wrong, I'm happy to be corrected. It's not the important point that I get every piece right, or even that I deeply know what I'm talking about. I don't. I'm just fascinated, right? I am not entitled to speak knowingly about these things. I'm just curious and filled with wonder. So that, it seems to me, might be excusable in case somebody wanted to form an accusation. In any case, their homes that they live in or they lived in when they lived in teepees, were really a profoundly unusual thing. They were like... See, here's the problem. They weren't exactly things. I think if we were able to think meaningfully about the teepees, if one was able to, if I was able to, if you were able to, if we could do it together, we'd have an initial problem in that there wouldn't be a correct category to place them in. Right? They are not just things. They are not precisely beings. They have qualities that necessarily that are necessarily intrinsic to them, that cause the categories that we would ordinarily distinguish, I think, to kind of collapse. And again, I'm happy if someone disagrees with me. Maybe this is more my perspective than a Blackfoot perspective. But from what I understood and took in my own way, I will admit and take responsibility for, this is a problem for regular Western minds, right? There are properties and qualities and functions of teepees before the colonists came, at least, and maybe for some time after, and still today, that cause them to not fit in any ordinary category, because they have some qualities associated with beings, yet they are not beings. They have qualities associated with things, yet they are not things. They have qualities associated with the universe, yet they are not the universe, precisely. But what they can be thought of is little, unique instances on the outside. there are sky beings. The sun may appear, the moon may appear, the morning star may be indicated, I call it the companion star, but the false morning star may be indicated. Around the base, there's often like a band of dark with some white circles that go around the base, though this is not the only way. Those have a very special significance. The structure of the teepee itself is quite profound because it's scalar, right? First of all, it's one thing, but it has components, but it's scalar. It goes from a sort of a point to a base. And on the outside, there could be animals too on the outside. But usually there are routes inside the animals that are significant and depicted. Might be a bear, there might be a deer, there might be another animal. And the significances of these things are not Western. They have extra dimensions of meaning that we don't do. But in the collection of teepees, right, each one is similar, but each one is unique. And on the outside there is sort of the sky and the world of origin, and on the inside there is the home and the heart and the fire. And it's one place, so there's no privacy, right, inside. Inside there, it's almost like each little family is a bit like mankind's relationship to the sky inside the teepee. There's all different ways of thinking about it, useful ones. But my point is just that if you live inside a living world model, which, like these teepees, which might seem to us to be ridiculous, they might seem to us to be, you know, primitive or not sufficiently advanced or protective for the elements, or so on and so forth. It's so profound to think of the difference in the ways of life of a people who live inside a teepees that depict their relationships, that recall and remind them and embody their relationships with their ancestors and the sky and the origins of life and death and the living places, the living beings. Their homes embody these relationships, and it's not merely symbolic. This is the really cool thing. Though we would call those symbols, I don't think they would, because they're not really symbols. Their function, well, it's actually even like, the whole language doesn't work. They're not there to function. That's not why they make, I mean, yes, of course they make teepees to function, but I mean the symbols and the sun being there, for instance, and so on. So it's really profound that they lived within these embodied reflections of the universe as they understood and experienced it together. And how different that is from living in a box, even though, in a sense, we're doing the same thing. We're living in a model of the universe. We've just forgotten that this is so, and architects all know this, and have all kinds of interesting ways of playing with that. But ours is extremely structured, representational, which is less than symbolic. Right? We've sacrificed more depth and richness than mere symbols might. Though, of course, I'm speaking very generally. There are unique examples of different things all over the place. I'm looking at what concerns me. So these are some of the things I've been rolling over in my mind today. Appreciate all of you very much and hope that our travels together while I get my exercise and visit the garden are somehow refreshing, nourishing, and thought-provoking. I don't really like the word provoke. I don't want to provoke thoughts. Are those pears? Or are they figs? Huh. Oh, I gotta figure this out. They look like figs, actually. Thank you for joining me. Hope to see you again soon.